Have you ever told someone no, and they acted like you just threatened national security? I told a woman she couldn't walk into my backyard without permission. 3 minutes later, she was on the phone with 911, reporting me like I was a loose pit bull. What I thought was a petty misunderstanding spiraled into violation notices, legal threats, and a full-blown HOA circus where the ringleader made up the rules as she went. The crazy part? I caught every second on camera. Every glare, every lie, every whisper she forgot was being recorded. Guess who really had the power in that moment? If you've ever lived next to someone who thinks they run the zip code, keep listening. My name's Caleb Foster. 8 months ago, my wife Danielle and I moved to Elmwood Ridge in Georgia, hoping for fresh air, peace, and quiet. What we got instead was Monica Layton. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're tuning in from. If you love wild, true-feeling stories full of twists, justice, and just the right dose of HOA drama, go ahead and tap that subscribe button. Tomorrow's tale? Even juicier. And trust me, the surprise is coming next. They're the kind you'll be telling your neighbors about. I'm a remote tech consultant, which means I sit at home writing code and quietly minding my business while the rest of the world argues about who left the recycling bin out. 8 months ago, my wife Danielle and I moved into Elmwood Ridge, a seemingly perfect cul-de-sac in Georgia with big trees, tidy lawns, and neighbors who wave like they mean it. Until they don't. Danielle works as an emergency dispatcher, which means she handles chaos with the calm of a Buddhist monk and the precision of a Swiss watch. We thought we'd landed in small-town paradise. Instead, we ended up with Monica Layton, self-appointed HOA enforcer, wearer of indoor heels, and the kind of person who says, "Actually, that's not allowed," before you even finish your sentence. And the kicker? She wasn't on the sidewalk. She was inside our fence taking pictures like she was casing the place for an HGTV episode nobody asked for. So I did what any modern man with a smartphone and a gut feeling does. I started recording. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I simply asked her what she was doing on my property. She turned around, raised her sunglasses like a movie villain, and smiled, with the confidence of someone who's gotten away with nonsense before. "I'm Monica Layton," she said, "president of the Elmwood Ridge Homeowners Association. I'm conducting a compliance inspection." Now, I don't know what kind of HOA she thought she was running, but mine doesn't include warrantless yard raids. I reminded her that Georgia state law doesn't give her or her clipboard magical powers to enter private property without permission. And with all the charm of a tax audit, she told me I'd be hearing from the HOA very soon. Then she strutted out the side gate like she'd just done the neighborhood a favor. 48 hours later, I got the letter. Certified mail, thick envelope, violation notice stamped across the top, like I was being summoned to HOA court. I half expected it to say I owed back taxes on my attitude. Instead, it accused me of breaking quiet hour rules by typing too loudly during the day, yes, typing, claimed our forest green front door wasn't an approved earth tone even though it was literally listed in the handbook, and said my car was parked at a 47-degree angle instead of 45. I'd checked the bylaws. Twice. There was nothing about keyboard volume or driveway geometry. Monica hadn't just stretched the rules. She'd rewritten them in invisible ink, and as I held that absurd letter, one thought kept looping in my head. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. About someone who couldn't stand not being obeyed. I'll admit, at first I thought I could handle it with a phone call or a calm chat, but when I heard that tone in Monica's voice, the kind that says, "I know better than you and I always win," something inside me clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a strategy. And as it turned out, I wasn't her first target, just the latest. What Monica didn't know, though, was that I wasn't going to roll over. And more importantly, she had no idea my wife was the one answering her emergency calls, the woman with the power to send help or send a spotlight straight to the problem. One thing was clear. This wasn't going to end with a lawn violation. It was going to end with a reckoning. The envelope looked like it had been delivered by the IRS on red billboard, bold letters, red stamps, and enough legal formatting to scare a law student. Notice of HOA violations, it said, like I'd been caught running a nightclub out of my garage. I opened it, expecting a warning about overgrown grass or trash bins left out too long. Instead, what I got was a bizarre list of charges that felt like they'd been written by someone hallucinating under fluorescent lighting. First, I was cited for excessive keyboard typing sounds during community nap hours. Nap hours? Apparently, working from home is a misdemeanor now. The second violation claimed my patio umbrella didn't meet the approved earth-toned spectrum. Ours was mocha brown, for the record. And the final charge, driveway vehicle alignment deviates beyond 2 degrees from HOA curb angle standards. I stared at the page like it was written in a dialect only Monica Layton could understand. It would have been hilarious if it hadn't come with a $750 0 cents fine and a threat of legal escalation. Whatever Monica was doing, it was less about peace and more about punishment. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know how to read a contract, and our HOA handbook is thinner than a menu at a gas station sushi joint. I dug it out that night and flipped through every page like I was searching for a missing will. Not a single mention of keyboard decibels, nothing about specific umbrella hues, and definitely no geometry exam required to park in my own driveway. The document was clear, basic, and boring. Exactly what you'd expect from an HOA, which made Monica's letter even more suspect. She wasn't enforcing rules, she was inventing them, out of thin air and thin patience. The irony was that she wrapped it all in community harmony, like a rotten fish gift wrapped in silk. And I had a growing feeling I wasn't the only one who'd received this kind of neighborhood extortion note. But who else was talking? The next day, I crossed the street to visit Mr. Lionel Gray, a retired Marine who'd lived in Elmwood Ridge for over 2 decades. I figured if anyone knew the HOA's dirty laundry, it was the guy who still mowed his lawn with military precision. Lionel took one look at my letter and shook his head like he'd just watched a rookie try to disassemble a rifle backward. "She got you too, huh?" he said. "Monica's been pulling this same stunt for months now. Starts with fake violations, then piles on the pressure. Most folks just pay the fine or move out. That's the play." According to Lionel, 3 families had sold their homes in the past year, all after getting hit with similar violation letters. 2 of them left without a fight. The third tried to push back but suddenly found themselves facing city inspectors, HOA votes, and code enforcement visits every week. "She's running them out," he said, "so her sister can buy up properties cheap." I felt my stomach sink. This wasn't just one power-hungry woman with a badge. It was a rigged system, quiet, calculated, and wearing the mask of HOA authority. The absurdity of the situation was starting to burn. I mean, suburban life is supposed to come with its fair share of passive-aggressive lawn signs and competitive holiday decor, but not political theater dressed up as property management. Monica wasn't a president. She was a neighborhood warlord armed with stationery and a color-coded binder, and every violation was a message. Comply or be crushed by paperwork. It was like being in a sitcom written by Kafka. I started imagining the next letter, violation. Your porch light blinks with suspicious rhythm. And as ridiculous as it all sounded, it worked. People were leaving, selling fast, cheap, quiet, because no one expects to fight for their sanity when they move to a place with community potlucks. I had to remind myself this wasn't normal, and I wasn't crazy for thinking something was deeply, comically, dangerously off. But here's the thing about people like Monica. They count on you staying quiet, on your willingness to be embarrassed, to doubt yourself, to fold under pressure. That was her real tactic. Not law, not order, but silence. So I decided I wasn't going to play that part. I scanned every page of the HOA handbook and photographed every corner of our property. I took sound recordings of our keyboard noise, ran a digital level check on the car in the driveway, and printed out color swatches proving our umbrella belonged to the same shade family as half the HOA board's lawn furniture. Because if Monica wanted a game of documents, I was going to show up with an archive. And somewhere deep in my gut, I felt it. This wasn't the last envelope. It was just the beginning of her favorite game. But she didn't know yet, I was about to change the rule. So, if you think HOA drama ends with a few silly fines, think again. Monica wasn't just writing me up, she was writing a script. And next? Let's just say she brought backup, a camera crew, and a legal-looking clipboard. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when she calls 911 and doesn't realize who's on the other end of the line. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and drop a comment if your HOA's ever tried pulling a fast one. Because in the next part, the script flips. And the dispatcher? Yeah, she's married to the guy Monica's trying to run out. I always thought the most dramatic thing I'd see in my front yard would be a squirrel falling off the bird feeder. But that illusion shattered the morning Monica Layton and her husband Eric arrived on my porch with a tripod, a clipboard, and a level of confidence that usually requires actual authority. I was in my office, halfway through a cup of microwave-reheated coffee, when I heard the unmistakable sound of folding metal. I looked out the window and saw a camera being set up facing my front door. Monica, dressed like a budget realtor ready to film a commercial, was already speaking into her phone like she was anchoring a live HOA news report. Eric stood behind her, shuffling through a leather briefcase like he was searching for dignity and paperwork at the same time. I stepped outside, phone in hand, already recording. "Mr. Foster," Monica declared, "you've refused multiple requests to comply with HOA regulations. Under Emergency Compliance Code 6-ALA, we are here to conduct a property inspection," Eric added. "This notice authorizes an immediate review of your premises." He held out a document with the kind of formatting that screams, "Typed last night after 2 glasses of Cabernet." I scanned it, noting the Comic Sans font and suspiciously vague language. "You do realize this isn't an actual legal document, right?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Emergency inspections aren't a thing, not unless you're hiding a meth lab behind your garden shed. They brought a camera and a made-up ordinance. I brought my phone and the Georgia State Property Code." It wasn't going to be a long conversation. Monica didn't flinch. She pulled out her phone, thumb already dialing. "You're obstructing a lawful inspection," she snapped. "This is a direct violation of HOA compliance procedure. I'm calling the police." I didn't even try to stop her. In fact, I welcomed it, because the last time she called 911, she didn't know who was sitting on the other end. This time, she's still Danielle. My wife, my calm in a crisis, my personal version of 911 insurance, was on shift again. She'd been following every move Monica had made since the first violation notice landed in our mailbox. When Monica dialed, Danielle answered. Cool as ever, professional to the core, and fully prepared to hear her own name tossed around like she was the villain in a suburban soap opera. Danielle later told me Monica opened with her usual flair. "This is Monica Layton, HOA president. I'm at 209 Elmbrook, and the homeowner is refusing a mandated inspection. He's becoming aggressive." Danielle asked calmly, "Is he threatening you, ma'am?" Monica stammered, "Well, no, not physically, but he's recording us. He's being uncooperative." Danielle pressed again. "Are you in danger?" Silence. A moment later, Monica muttered, "He's obstructing compliance protocol." That was all Danielle needed. She tagged it as a non-emergency civil dispute and dispatched Officer Bennett, a local cop with more HOA calls under his belt than any human should have to endure. Bennett had already been to our place once. He knew the dynamic, he knew the act, and most importantly, he didn't like having his time wasted. Bennett arrived 10 minutes later. Monica greeted him like a celebrity on a red carpet, full of exaggerated smiles and manila folders. Eric hovered nearby, looking less like a lawyer and more like a guy regretting his marriage. I stood back, letting the performance play out while still recording. Monica launched into her speech about emergency inspection rights, waving the flimsy printout like it was a golden ticket. Officer Bennett took the document, gave it a 5-second glance, and handed it back. "This isn't a legal warrant, ma'am," he said flatly. And unless you have a court order or the homeowner's consent, you have no authority to conduct a property inspection. Monica's face twitched. Eric's briefcase looked like it wanted to close itself and escape. Bennett turned to me. "You've got your footage, Mr. Foster?" I nodded. "Everything from the moment they stepped onto my driveway." He nodded. "Good. You're within your rights to deny access. They need to leave." This shift in power was so sudden it was almost poetic. Monica, who'd marched onto my property like a sheriff in a spaghetti western, suddenly looked like she'd forgotten her lines. "This isn't over," she snapped, voice wobbling. "We'll escalate this to the board. We'll take it higher." She said it like she had a ladder to God himself. Eric gently tugged her elbow. "Let's go," he muttered, eyes locked on the sidewalk like it was a map out of embarrassment. As they packed up their little HOA theater set, I stood in the doorway and watched them retreat, camera, clipboard, and credibility in hand. And while Monica's voice was still tight with rage, mine was steady with something better. Evidence. But here's the thing about people like Monica Layton. They don't retreat. They reload. As she backed away that day, I knew she wasn't planning to let it go. She was just regrouping. Because when her performance didn't work on the cops and her fake documents failed to scare me, she did what power-hungry people always do. She looked for a darker way to win. And what she tried next? It wasn't just desperate, it was dangerous. And the worst part? She still hadn't realized the dispatcher on the line, the one taking her calls, filing her inconsistencies, and building the paper trail, wasn't just a random voice on the other end. It was the woman she was trying to silence. And Danielle? She wasn't staying silent anymore. I used to think the scariest sound in a neighborhood was a smoke alarm at 2 a.m. Turns out, it's a soft knock at your door, followed by someone whispering, "Can we talk about Monica?" That's how it started with Naomi James, the widow 2 houses down. Danielle and I brought her some banana bread and a gentle question. Had she ever received one of those HOA violation letters? Her front porch looked like peace incarnate. Hanging fern, rocking chair, flag gently swaying in the breeze. But her eyes told a different story. "I still have them," she said. And when she opened the drawer beside her recliner, it was like finding a time capsule from a neighborhood under siege. Envelopes, warnings, anonymous complaints, and one hand-signed note from Monica Layton that read, "I'm just trying to help you comply, Naomi," which is kind of like a fox telling the henhouse, "I'm just organizing your seating chart." Naomi explained how it all began after her husband passed. Monica started with little things. Untrimmed hedges, a hummingbird feeder visible from the sidewalk, a doormat that wasn't community neutral. Naomi complied at first. Who wouldn't, after losing someone and just trying to keep their head down? But the letters kept coming. One week it was a light bulb too bright, the next a plant pot the wrong texture, and when Naomi asked to see the rules she'd allegedly broken, Monica waved her off with, "It's in the updated standards. You should have received the memo." Spoiler, there was no memo, just a steady stream of shame and stress until Naomi considered moving. "I didn't think I had a choice," she said. "She made me feel like I was the problem." That sentence stuck to my ribs like a bad meal, because if Monica could twist Naomi, strong, warm, no-nonsense Naomi, then how many others had she steamrolled? That's when Danielle said, "We need to talk to Frank." So we did. And Frank Dugan, retired military and proud owner of a conspiracy theory-grade filing system, didn't just have a few letters. He had an entire manila folder labeled Monica BC. Inside were 17 documents, 3 voice memos, 2 anonymous emails, and 1 handwritten complaint from 2021 accusing him of excessive patriotic decor. The man had put out 2 flags on Memorial Day. The nerve. "She's not enforcing rules," Frank said. "She's executing a plan." And then he laid it out. Monica's younger sister, Rachel, had been trying to buy a home in Elmwood Ridge for 2 years. Couldn't afford market value, so Monica started playing real estate matchmaker the hard way by driving out residents until she could cherry-pick homes for a steal. Naomi's house had already been shown twice by Rachel. Frank's home got 3 inquiries the week after his flag incident. And mine? Well, let's just say I started getting postcards that said, "Thinking of selling." So I did what any tech guy with too much righteous indignation and a high-speed scanner would do. I built a case, not just for me, but for every neighbor Monica had cornered with fake citations and legalese scare tactics. I scanned Naomi's letters, digitized Frank's emails, compiled my own recordings, and created a timeline of harassment so clear it could double as a lesson plan. We weren't looking at an HOA president gone rogue. We were looking at a blueprint of manipulation, a pattern. And the beauty of patterns is that once you show them to people, they stop feeling crazy and start getting mad. We quietly reached out to neighbors. One by one, the reaction was always the same. First, disbelief, then realization, then what can I do to help? Turns out Monica hadn't built a community, she'd built a stage. And we were all extras in her performance. The props, violation letters, the script, fear. What started as an awkward conversation with a widow became a slow-burning revolution. Frank hosted a gathering under the pretense of discussing lawn irrigation. It turned into a full-blown neighborhood truth session. 7 families shared letters. 3 had considered selling. 1 had already signed paperwork and was rethinking it. And in the middle of that backyard, over cheap wine and bug spray, something shifted. We weren't just random victims of one woman's power trip. We were witnesses, allies. And once we saw each other clearly, we weren't afraid anymore. That night, we drafted our own memo, the real one, a statement of collective concern about HOA abuse and a request for a formal review. The plan to deliver it at the next community board meeting. But we knew Monica wouldn't take it lying down. She'd strike back. The question wasn't whether she'd retaliate. It was how loud, how fast, and how reckless she'd get when she realized her curtain was falling. And just when we thought we had Monica cornered with truth and teamwork, she did what power-hungry people always do when the crowd turns. She doubled down. You won't believe what she pulled next. Spoiler, it involved a heavily edited video, a fake petition, and a room full of neighbors holding their breath. If you're rooting for the underdog and ready to see what happens when the bully finally faces the music, hit that subscribe button and stick around. The next part? Let's just say the HOA meeting doesn't go the way Monica planned. If you've ever seen someone losing power in real time, you know it's never quiet. It's theatrical, dramatic, sometimes even cinematic. Which is probably why Monica showed up 1 week later with a brand new camera crew and a wireless mic clipped to her collar like she was prepping for her HOA-themed Netflix debut. She didn't knock. She didn't even announce herself. She just started filming at the end of our driveway, talking loud enough for the neighbors to hear, gesturing toward my house like it was a crime scene and she was the star witness. The footage made it onto the community Facebook group within hours. Edited, of course, stripped of context, cut to make me look like the aggressor, the hostile neighbor who didn't respect community standards. It was laughably bad, like a middle school project with a villain soundtrack and everything, but it had just enough drama to stir the pot. That was all she needed to call for an emergency HOA meeting. The email went out that night. Urgent. Community safety discussion, complete with a copy of her newly circulated petition to have me formally sanctioned, or better yet, removed from the neighborhood. The attached signatures looked suspiciously neat, all in similar handwriting. Danielle ran them through a scanner app and flagged half as forgery. But Monica wasn't thinking about credibility. She was banking on spectacle. Her goal wasn't just to smear me, it was to shake everyone else into silence. Fear-based compliance, divide and conquer, classic HOA dictatorship 101. But what she hadn't counted on, what she never saw coming, was that we'd show up with more than a story. We brought people, proof, and one very tired police officer who was ready to put the saga to bed. The community center was packed. Folding chairs, hushed voices, and that tense energy you feel right before someone's about to get called out in public. Monica stood at the front with her laptop hooked up to the projector, dressed like she was giving a TED Talk about neighborhood morality. She opened with a monologue about preserving peace and upholding the values of Elmwood Ridge before launching into a video presentation that featured me in slow motion, holding a phone and walking toward her like some HOA version of Godzilla. She paused at keyframes, added dramatic music. One neighbor whispered, "Is this real?" It wasn't, but it was polished enough to raise eyebrows until I stood up, cleared my throat, and said, "Mind if I present Exhibit B?" Danielle walked to the front beside me. Officer Bennett followed. Then dispatcher Carla, who'd come on her own time just to see this circus shut down. I connected my own laptop to the projector and hit play. What followed was the raw footage. Monica trespassing, calling 911, exaggerating details, failing to answer direct questions from dispatch. Then Carla played the audio logs. Each 911 call from Monica, one after the other, filled with contradictions and vague claims. As the recordings played, you could feel the mood shift, from curiosity to confusion to outrage. Every time Monica used emergency services as a personal sword, it was right there in her voice. No fear, no threat, just manipulation, wearing a badge of authority she never actually earned. Then came the petition. We had 3 residents stand up and say they never signed it. One neighbor brought their child's handwriting homework to show that Monica had copied it line for line. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was embarrassing. Monica tried to object, her voice shaking, claiming that we were distorting the truth. But no one was buying it anymore. Not after the tapes. Not after the signatures. Not after watching her carefully constructed persona fall apart like wet cardboard. The HOA board called for a vote. It wasn't close. 23-1. One abstention. One very red-faced Monica. Just like that, she was removed as president, stripped of her title. And for the first time in months, the room felt lighter. But the moment that stuck with me most came afterward. Eric Layton, who'd spent most of the meeting sweating through his collar and avoiding eye contact, approached Officer Bennett outside the building. I stood nearby, close enough to hear it. "I didn't think we'd get caught," he said quietly. Not with anger, not with defiance, just a tired resignation that said more than any confession could. And you know what? I believed him. Because people like Monica think the rules are for everyone else. But Eric, he knew better. He just thought if he kept his head down, the fallout wouldn't hit him. Spoiler, it always does. Especially when you misuse the law to weaponize a lawn dispute. But Monica wasn't quite done yet. And what she tried to pull next? Well, let's just say it involved a restraining order, a fake witness, and a Hail Mary that turned into her final mistake. If you thought the HOA meeting was her downfall, wait until you hear how she tried to twist the courts and how it backfired in spectacular fashion. You know a storm's truly over not when the thunder stops, but when you realize you've stopped flinching. That's how it felt 6 weeks after Monica Layton was removed from her HOA throne. No more passive-aggressive newsletters, no more anonymous violation slips. Just the subtle, unfamiliar peace of knowing your patio umbrella was finally free to blow in the wind without getting cited. Of course, the story didn't just vanish. Monica was formally charged with misuse of emergency services, harassment, and falsifying community records. She pled guilty to reduced charges, paid a $5,000 0-cents fine, served 6 months probation, and, per the settlement, agreed to sell her home and leave Elmwood Ridge. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't hold a yard sale. One morning she was there, and by the next her shutters were closed, and a for sale sign stood like a tombstone. Fitting, really, the end of an era built on intimidation and clipboards. Eric, for his part, avoided criminal charges but wasn't quite off the hook. The state bar issued a formal reprimand for improper legal representation under conflict of interest, which is polite legalese for you knew better and you still played along. He tried to keep his distance after Monica left, though I did run into him once at the post office. He looked smaller, like a man who finally realized that silence, too, has a price tag. He nodded at me, I nodded back, and we both knew that was the most closure either of us was going to get. As for Monica, The neighborhood grapevine says she moved 2 towns over. New zip code, same old clipboard. Some folks just never retire their drama, but here, she won't be missed. The real surprise came the following month when the HOA held a special election. Naomi James, the same woman Monica tried to shame into submission, was nominated as president. She didn't campaign, didn't canvass, just showed up with a folder, a plan, and more neighborhood goodwill than anyone expected. She won unanimously. Her first order of business: burn the old rule book. Not literally, but spiritually. She introduced 3 new bylaws. All HO fines had to be accompanied by written proof from multiple board members. Every resident had the right to a hearing before any action was taken, and any future president caught abusing their role would be immediately removed and barred from re-election. Transparency, fairness, and accountability. Not the sexiest campaign slogans, but man, they sounded like poetry after the circus we'd just survived. Danielle, meanwhile, was recognized at a city council meeting for her role in exposing the misuse of 911 services. Her dispatch logs, voice recordings, and sharp ear for inconsistencies helped paint a picture the police couldn't ignore. She didn't want a spotlight, just quieter days and fewer neighbors misusing emergency lines, but I could tell the recognition meant something. For months, she'd held the line between composure and chaos, while the HOA tried to weaponize fear. And now? She was being thanked, not just by officials, but by the people she quietly helped protect. And let me tell you, watching your wife get a standing ovation in a room full of people who once doubted you, that's a memory that lingers. As for me, I've learned something important. Fences aren't just made of wood. The real ones, the ones that keep bullies out and peace in, they're made of truth, documentation, allies. A stubborn refusal to play by crooked rules. Monica barged through our gate, thinking she had authority. We bricked it up with facts. Every false report, every fake citation, every piece of her performance, we turned it into evidence and we used it to build something stronger. Elmwood Ridge is still just a neighborhood. The lawns still grow, the sprinklers still run at the worst possible hour, but now there's a sense of ownership that doesn't come from signatures or bylaws. It comes from standing up, from saying no with a paper trail, and that's the kind of peace nobody can cite you for. And that, folks, is how we took our neighborhood back. Not with yelling, not with lawsuits, not even with revenge, but with truth, patience, and a community that finally opened its eyes. If you've stuck with me through this whole story, I hope you realize something bigger than just one bad HOA president. This wasn't just about Monica. It was about what happens when one person decides to stand their ground and inspires others to do the same. It was about a neighborhood that chose courage over comfort, and a woman, my wife, who turned a headset and a steady voice into a lifeline for justice. The real win here isn't that Monica left. It's that we stayed, that we built something stronger in the rubble of her control. We didn't just push back, we rewrote the rules. And in a world where power often hides behind policy, we proved that paper can cut both ways. The lesson? Document everything, know your rights, trust your gut. And don't mistake silence for compliance, because there's a whole lot of strength in the people who've had enough. So if this story made you think, if it made you smile, or maybe even remember a Monica of your own, go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment below, and tell us what part hit home for you. And if you want more stories like this, real stories full of twists, justice, and just the right amount of poetic karma, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Because trust me, in this neighborhood, the drama might have quieted down, but the stories? Oh, they're just getting started.